Hi and welcome to Upsiders Information. In today's video, I'll analyze the new moon in Pisces on February 27. But first, let me announce a slight shift in my new channel. Someone's feedback was that my information is as much about disclosure and awakening as it is financial. And I always mention how politics and finance are two sides of the same coin. But by geopolitics, I don't refer to the news we get from the mainstream media, what I like to call the weapons of mass distraction, if you know what I mean. Because the mainstream media is ruled by Neptune, the planet of deception, and ruler of this new moon in Pisces. And the mainstream media is to blame in part for the world conflicts, as is funded by warmongers to keep the cash cow going at the expense of the very same people they are instructed to brainwash. What I like to focus on is about the truth that they don't volunteer because they rather us not knowing since they affect us the most and not precisely in a convenient way. And that's why we want to be skeptical about their disclosure. So always question, do your research, and remain vigilant. What a real reporter should do, but those who do, they risk more than their profession in doing so. To be honest with you, it feels rather superficial to me to volunteer any astrological information about a certain asset without addressing the context in which that energy can manifest and what are the factors at play. That being said, I'm not a financial advisor. What I do is astrology, but astrology determines sentiment, and this is to give you an edge. Now, this new moon is ushering eclipse season. As always, new moons are new beginnings, and in Pisces is a spiritual sign. And we can say we're in pivotal times of endings and beginnings in a spiritual war. That manifests here on Earth in materials way, and not so materials too, as these days wars are more informational as to manipulate people rather than to force them, as force tends to backfire. And that's why it's so important to wake everybody up. So this new moon feels like the calm before the storm that can manifest with eclipse season in March. In the markets, new moon are local tops, usually, which will indicate a downtrade into the eclipse season that looks rather rocky. Now, eclipse season is about 6 weeks, 2 weeks prior the first eclipse, then the 2 weeks in between both eclipses, and 2 weeks after. And this new moon is surrounded by a stellium in Pisces, so a bunch of planets. And Pisces is the sign of reflection. And we're in a dark moon up until then. Dark moons are in a reflective mode too. The new moon is ruled by Neptune, the planet of reflection, and Jupiter, the great magnifier, magnifying this reflective mode. Neptune is a gas planet that looks like water and is the planet of illusion, delusion, deception, but also spirituality and awakening. Neptune is in rulership and is the only planet that has been in rulership for a while, especially since the North Node, like the North Star, moved into Pisces, and they actually recently conjuncted, amplifying this energy because the North Node acts as Jupiter. So we can say we're under very Neptunian times, as the Leo King likes to call it, the age of deception. And right from the Marx playbook, accuse your enemy of what you're doing while you're doing it to create confusion. But the markets don't like confusion. Now, this is in line with prophecy and the so-called apocalypse, which actually means revelations, because we are due for disclosure. And we're starting to see some things coming up already across the board. And not just about UAP soft disclosure, but financial too. And I have to speak between the lines here, but there are trillions of dollars missing from the black budget in reverse engineering programs of UFO technology used by the military-industrial complex like gravitic propulsion that we saw with the mysterious drones, and that's why they don't want to talk about it. And people started asking questions, how does this stay in the air for so long, etc. But that's another Pandora box that if you want to go down that rabbit hole, follow Catherine Austin Fitz from the Solari Report at solari.com. She's a whistleblower from the Bush times, and she has a lot of information and recommendations. Anyway, disclosure will continue with the PETA list after Epstein and Didi. And this is about control file, guys. This is to have something on influential figures that attend special elite parties where things get set up and there are strange rituals and hidden cameras as to manipulate the rich and powerful and influencers of public opinion, because this is how it works behind the scenes. But I don't want to say too much about that in here. But it all will come out in due time. They started with the Dodge auditing the US finances and making a lot of players angry. So this could result in another attempt against the president, as he's not out of the woods yet. And the new moon is conjunct the asteroid Ceres, which is the sickle of death, though this could be a metaphor, especially in a position with Trans-Pluto that highlights transformation, like the death of a system, for example, like the financial system as we know it, as there are plans to change it and move into a more digital system, since the US Corp is actually bankrupt. Is also the sickle of harvest, as taking profits for what we can see a plunge in the markets. But it's all connected even when it looks disjointed, yet this is just the beginning. So if it feels like too much too soon, buckle up, because there's a lot more to come and time is speeding up with the outer planets changing signs and solar cycle 25. The outer planets are slow moving as their ecliptic around the sun takes from decades to centuries depending on the planet, affecting generations. Outer planets changing signs, and with that element, modality, and polarity are rare events, and thus they're big events too. But all of them doing so within a year hasn't happened since 1956, and a lot happened then in the world, from South American to Muslim countries and revolutions to airline accidents and beyond, and we can see some of that today too. But now we're going from water and earth, which is yin and slow, to air and fire, which is yang and fast. So we're in for a roller coaster ride. On top of that, we're in solar maximum 25, which historically has coincided with periods of upheaval in the earth. If you follow Greg Braden, the author of The Divine Matrix, he talks about the Russian scientist Alexander Tejevsky, I hope I'm pronouncing it correct, studies that ranges from the mid-1700s to the mid-1900s, and you can see how major events from wars, revolutions, and social upheaval and so on correlate to periods of heightened solar activity. If you're familiar with the Carrington event, the most intense geomagnetic storm recorded in history, peaking on September 1859 during solar cycle 10, it created auroral displays that were reported globally and that caused sparking and fires in telegraph stations. So the geomagnetic storm was the result of a coronal mass ejection from the sun colliding with the Earth's magnetosphere. And that was 5 times what we have seen with the northern lights in America. But nowadays, all of our system and our lives are electronically based and intertwined respectively. So something like this could have major ripple effects. And I'm not predicting that, but if that were ever to happen again, this could be the year for it. Especially when Uranus, that is like lightning, moves into Gemini by mid-year. And Gemini is the sign of communications ruled by Mercury, the messenger and merchant planet, and Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, so this could affect the financial system too. But with eclipse season in March and September, we're in for surprises as well, as they have an unpredictable nature. Now, the core ruler of this new moon is Jupiter, the great magnifier, which happens to be in a 10 square with the new moon. And this implies overconfidence, especially with Jupiter being in detriment in Gemini, which is dispossessed by Mercury, the merchant planet. And Mercury is all about thinking, so is also in detriment in Pisces, which is all about feeling. So there's a mutual reception here, as they much rather change signs, attenuating the discomfort. Now, Mercury is sandwiched almost at the midpoint between the North Node of expansion and Saturn's constriction, not knowing what to think. With the stellium in Pisces, from grounded Saturn to foggy Neptune, the confusion of this new moon could be amplified. Now, recently Mars stationed direct, giving us some craving for action, but being at fall in Cancer, the sign of the animal that doesn't leave the home, Mars is feeling very constrained, especially because it's out of bounds and wants to throw caution to the wind. And that would not be wise now, because right after the new moon, Mercury enters shadow. So plans will be needing some revisiting. And beginning March, Venus in Aries will go retrograde, making us question everything from relationships to investments. Because on top of being in detriment, because Venus is the planet of harmony, diplomacy, love, and luxury, and Aries is the sign of fight or flight, survival, and is the hot sign of war. So, as you can see, most planets are uncomfortable in their positions, adding to the odd feelings. And Venus doesn't go retrograde as often, so when it does, it makes a mark, both in our personal lives and in the markets, as it rules money too. Now, if you track the cycles where Venus went retrograde, most of the times the market experienced a correction, with the exception of the times where the markets were in a downturn and Venus retrograde came to save the day. On a personal note, Venus retrograde can bring someone from the past, but I wouldn't start anything new till after mid-April, because you want to let the planet catch some momentum forward after it stations direct. So ideally, wait till after tax season. That's a good reminder, when we'll be over eclipse season as well. And because Venus has a cycle of 8 years, expect themes and performance similar to that of Venus retrograde beginning of March to mid-April of 2017, where we had a correction in the markets both for the SP 500 and Bitcoin. But because it's not an isolated event, as Mercury retrogrades mid-March too, the whole astral climate is challenging. Plus, eclipses are a wild card, so it gets compounded. Be that as it may, how does it look for the market? For crypto, Bitcoin has been holding strong in spite of restrictive Saturn influences, but with Venus going retrograde and eclipses, we might be in an all-time highs, in which case money might rotate to the first layer coins, which is what we need for an alt season that we've been all waiting for. As I mentioned in my previous video, and now with the Argentina fiasco and the Libra meme coin rug pull on the Solana network, this favors the Ethereum network. And coins like XRP and Stellar are to hold until they recover later on the year. For the stock market, with the new moon and the North Node in Pisces, sectors like drugs, alcohol, water-related industries, and fuels like oil and gas are favored. Then Neptune, which rules inflation, and Saturn, which rules recessions, will move into Aries from March to May respectively, causing stagflation. Basically, what you need increases while what you have decreases. So this doesn't make it to the headlines, as what they consider inflation leave energy and food out, which is BS, because that's what we need. And then again, as mentioned in every video, metals are favored too, though recently we had Venus perihelion, meaning closest to the sun, so some expect the trend change as gold reach an all-time high, and they have a point. But metals are more of a long-term holding to preserve wealth. And when Jupiter moves into Cancer mid-year, this will favor silver and silver-like metals for a year. And then Jupiter will go into Leo mid-next year, further in favoring gold too. And with Pluto conjunct Pallas, the asteroid of strategy, in Aquarius, the ruler of tech, this favors tech, crypto, and lithium, though it's contra-parallel Jupiter, so there could be some overconfidence in the sector as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if a correction happens during the eclipse. And finally, with Uranus in Taurus, the money sign, in harmonious aspect with the nodes, this favors uranium too. But we'll see how this eclipse will play out, as it can manifest in multiple scenarios, as the WF talks about polycrisis, so that should tell you something. The silver lining is that the shaking is to awaken, as per divine orchestration, as above, so below. And that's what they don't factor in. For now, the best way you can utilize this new moon in Pisces is to build and strengthen your spirituality, align yourself mentally not to get thrown off, because information is not to scare you but to prepare you. And preparedness comes from taking the surprise factor away. In the meantime, you can pray and meditate in better outcomes to manifest them, because Saturn is there to materialize spiritual energy too. And know that both your thought and your word have power, so use them to command justice from intention. The good news is that the remaining of the year looks better financially for crypto, at least until next year. So if anything, this too shall pass. So don't freak out and cut your losses yet. Save that to the end of the year to offset capital gains. With that, I will leave you today. It takes me some time to make this video, so please give me a like and feel free to comment below on what you would like me to cover next time. If you need a personal reading, reach out to me at upsidersinformation@pm.me. All the links are below. Be aware of scammers. I will never reach out to you. And see you in 2 weeks for the total lunar eclipse. Until then, namaste.